My name is Rob Abramowitz, business management and family office partner at Armanino, based in Los Angeles, California. And today I'm here to talk to you about sports industry trends and just talk about some different perspectives on what's happening in the world of sports. Just a really interesting time in college athletics. There was a roundtable, Senate roundtable regarding NIL, where there was various people interviewed. Nick Saban, former head coach of Alabama football, as well as some other athletic directors and conference commissioners, and also some players. And it was an interesting roundtable where they talked about the negatives, which Nick Saban kind of focused on, and they also talked about some of the positives, which some of the current athletes focused on, of how NIL is impacting the college landscape. And all this also sort of in the aftermath of the Dartmouth unionization decision, or at least their vote to unionize, and we'll see whether or not that ends up happening. But what was interesting from Nick is he talked about how really NIL and the transfer portal in college football, but also a pretty big issue in college basketball as well, is something that led to him wanting to retire. It basically changed the game he's coached for the last 50 years and really made it just about the money, right? Like, it wasn't about players who wanted to come play for him and develop under him and for him to help shape these young men. It was about how much they were going to pay the players, and the players want to go where they're going to get paid the most. And obviously everyone has their own opinions about that, and whether or not players should be paid, should be allowed to have this like open market system. But it was pretty interesting, just his comments really on the negative side. And then opposing that, on the positive side, you had some female athletes, some basketball players, talking about how, NIL has really made staying in college a viable option for them. They're able to put off going pro. They're able to capitalize on their social media, their social capital, really be very successful now instead of waiting. And that's really evident in women's sports, where you see the tremendous growth in women's sports, everything from the professional level down to the college level. Speaking of conference tournaments, the women's conference tournaments that started last week, seeing record numbers of people attending games. I believe every conference is reporting the highest numbers of attendees that they've ever had, both in person and the highest numbers on television as well. So the growth of women's sports continues to be really skyrocketing, and I think NIL is a big part of that. It's allowing them to really capitalize on their persona and really getting their name and image out there, and it's allowing them to just build on it. And you're seeing how that trickles all the way down to the viewing audience. So really interesting stuff. It'll be really interesting on how NIL continues to develop. As I mentioned, the Dartmouth unionization issue, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really speak to all the legalities of it. On one hand, I've heard that, college athletes are not employees, so they really can't unionize, so it doesn't hold any weight. And they shouldn't want to unionize, because if they unionize, there could be labor stoppages, in which case they wouldn't get paid at all, and it would have major implications to the sport in general, where there could be long hiatuses, could be, right before March Madness, there's a strike, or for some reason the union decides that they're not going to perform, and you could have all these ripple effects that are probably unforeseen consequences of why unionizing would be bad. And on the other hand, unionizing is just a way to give the athlete, control and a voice, and make sure that there's more equality in pay. And so there's a lot of aspects from that perspective that hold a lot of weight as well. And so these things will all play out, in court and among lawyers and in the Senate. Unfortunately, it's going to take a long time for these things to come to a resolution, but all these things are going to greatly impact the future of college sports. Some people saying college sports are in jeopardy. I hope that's not true as a big college sports fan, but I think there's definitely a way to move forward where everybody is aligned and players are incentivized and compensated, and maybe we could also curtail the Wild West effect that NIL has had so far. Moving on, some other things that I find really interesting right now is the continued involvement of sports betting, online betting, especially I would call the evolution of fantasy sports. Prize Picks is something that I think has gained a lot of popularity recently. It's definitely a new way of doing fantasy, maybe a masked way of betting or gambling, but it's really an intriguing, engaging way to do fantasy without it being a season-long commitment, without it being a situation where you're trying to go up against sharks and other, maybe fantasy experts, people that are using a bunch of analytics and tools that do it for a living. And Prize Picks really just gives the everyday person a simple way of participating in fantasy, everything from football to even dart throwing. So it's pretty wild and pretty fun to do. So I've been pretty interested to see how that continues to evolve, as well as ESPN's entrance into the sports betting arena and how that's going to continue to roll out. They obviously did a joint venture with Penn, and how they're rolling into sports betting and doing different lounges, betting lounges. You're seeing a lot more betting information sort of in your face when you're watching sports betting shows. So sports betting is definitely the future, I think, of the fans as it relates to sports viewing. Speaking of sports viewing, the streaming ventures, the joint venture between Fox and ESPN and Warner Brothers, sort of unheard of in a way that these companies would come together to put together a streaming service instead of individually. But I think you're seeing really the importance of why that could be useful. If you even talking back now to March Madness again, if you think about how you watch March Madness, some games are going to be on March Madness Live. Some games are on Paramount Plus. Some games are on, other apps. It's just sort of a messy situation. So if there's a way to bring that together, put it all on one streaming service that these major media companies are collaborating with, I think that could really be a nice solution for the fan. And we'll see how that all plays out, but it will be very interesting as well. AI and technology in sports, the NBA All-Star game that finished up recently, the use of technology regarding the interactive floor they had, really the video gamification of it was really interesting to see. Also on the Super Bowl, how they integrated SpongeBob, how they integrated, the Taylor Swift effect, really bringing in fans from different angles and increasing viewership. Again, record numbers on all these things. And I think a big part of it is how to engage with fans across different aspects that really may only have a nominal interest in the game itself, but are more interested in being part of the event. So these are really interesting ways to get those people involved as well. Lastly, something that I think is interesting is the continued development of new stadiums. So right now, the A's are relocating to Las Vegas, and there's been some talk about, the stadium that's going to be built there. And Is it going to be on the strip? What end of the strip? What's it going to look like? What's the feasibility? Lots of things regarding the way that will all come together. And then also in Chicago, the Chicago Bears have been searching for a new location for their stadium. And just as it seems like they finally figured out a way to stay in the city of Chicago, which everyone seemed to want, now there's pushback about, environmentalists and building on the lakefront and also tearing down parts of the old Soldier Field and how that's a historically relevant and lots of issues that really drag these things out. But it'll be interesting to see how the city of Chicago is able to really put that stadium together. I know there's incentive to do a dome stadium that helps bring in other events such as maybe the Super Bowl to Chicago, which obviously in the winter time would want to be indoors ideally, and then things like March Madness also, right? Being able to host that in Chicago. Chicago's the third largest media market in the country, hasn't been able to host those things because they don't have a modern stadium that's capable of accommodating it. So really important for the city to get that right and certainly make sure that it goes in the right location. Lots of things going on in sports. These are just some of the things I find to be interesting today. And certainly by tomorrow, there'll be new issues that we're not even thinking about. Very dynamic, VUCA situation that is always changing. And we're here to help navigate you through those issues, whether it's that you're an individual athlete, you're an executive in sports, whatever your role might be, we're here with the resources to help you get through today for a better tomorrow. I hope you all have a great rest of your day and enjoy the upcoming March Madness tournament. Thank you.